I call the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, it's nice to see you back in the chair, sir, and through you may I compliment the outgoing Speaker, Dr Lockwood Smith, for his service to this House. Mr Speaker, it's good to see colleagues and members on all sides of this House looking refreshed, suntanned and back from their holiday breaks, and we're here in this debate to open Parliament and take the long view, the broad view on the challenges facing the government and facing the country. To do that, Mr Speaker, let me quote you National's formula for economic success. Here it goes. We must get the rottenness out of the system. High costs of living and high living will come down. People will work harder, live a more moral life. Values will be adjusted and enterprising people will pick up the wrecks from less enterprising people. Mr Speaker, most of that quote was from American Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon, whose economic policies led directly to the Great Depression of the 1930s, but they could equally have come from John Key. If there's one thing that history has shown us, National's slash and burn economics never works. History's shown us that by rewarding big business while penalising ordinary people, deregulating the economy in a way that encourages recklessness, making laws that ensures the wealth flows from those at the bottom up to those at the top is a certain recipe for disaster. It didn't work in the 1930s, and it didn't work when National last tried it. And it hasn't worked this time around. Just this week, New Zealand's manufacturers warned that they may be forced to leave New Zealand. Why? Because National's hands-off policies have left the New Zealand dollar so high that our manufacturers can't make a living. Is that good economic management? No, it's madness. It's madness and a repeat of the madness that led to the formation of the first Labour government. Remember, please, it was the first Labour government that set in place just about all that we remember as being good about New Zealand. A government that ensured people had jobs. A government that ensured people had houses, just like the one John Key grew up in, Dr Hutchinson. A government that ensured that there were hospitals and health care for all when they needed it. And a government that planted the seeds of economic growth through prudent investment in projects like massive forestry schemes that generate wealth to this day. So let's not make any mistake about this. What National really wants is to turn the country back to a time before the first Labour government. Where's the proof? National's back to its old tricks. Sell our assets, rob workers of their rights, savage public services, chase the budget down its own fiscal plug hole and become an environmental laughingstock for the world. National's certainly slashing public services. The result is there for all to see. Unemployment is back up to 7.3%. There are 175,000 New Zealanders unemployed. That's up just 12% in the last year. Over 100,000 families without pride, decent incomes, or hope for their future, and another 100 on part-time work or insufficient hours. And the most vulnerable, those truly in need of better public services, have been thrown to the cold winds of recession and division. National said they'd take the rough edges off the recession, remember? That's right. And what did they do? Rather than helping people through it, they left them to it. Tens of thousands of families forced to drift between rental homes they can't afford while their kids get shunted from school to school and their parents watch and their hearts break. And I want to congratulate Annette King and David Shearer for Labour's plans to put 100,000 families back into affordable homes while National does nothing. Real incomes are lower now than when National took office. The gap between rich and poor has widened, almost never been worse. And the rush to the departure gates has become a stampede. Economic growth forecasts have been downsized more regularly than a New Year's diet resolution. And New Zealanders now widely understand that the government's recipe is not working. Where John Key once looks relaxed, he now looks resigned. Where once Kiwis might have had hope, they are now just disappointed. They've been hanging out, they've been hanging on for the brighter future that never came. Mr. Speaker, Labour's message is that a new era is needed, an era of hands-on government, of real change, of big change, not tinkering. We need change that listens to people in their communities, that gives them a stake in their own future. Change they have helped build together and share responsibility for. Mr. Speaker, change the government. Get change that recognises that the strength of our ideas has always come from the grassroots. Change that sees unions, for example, as a core part of building better workplaces, not as a cost to be saved. And the way that we'll deliver this change, the way that we'll organise, will be robust, but it won't be top-down, like Christchurch, where the people have felt the heavy weight of the government through its ministers. Mr. Speaker, we will work with communities. We will do politics with them, not to them. And when we stand back and look at it, we all know the change that we need is remarkably simple and obvious. We need to change from a low-value extractive economy to a high-value, high-skill one, from one that does not see workers as commodities but as part of a better business, from seeing innovation not as a luxury but as the lifeblood of our future, from a tax system that doesn't reward property speculators but rewards hard work and enterprise, from a monetary policy that leaves our exporters withering on the vine the harsh winds of an overvalued exchange rate, to one that delivers real economic growth. Mr. Speaker, Labour has tried, tested and proven policies in all of these areas, and I've been proud to work on some of them. Capital gains tax, universal KiwiSaver, sustainable superannuation, using those savings to grow and deepen our domestic banking and capital markets. But we need to go further. And as the Engineers Union said to the Manufacturing Inquiry on Monday, we need a higher commitment to skill development, a more stable exchange rate, procurement policies that work for New Zealand, and a new commitment to developing our provinces and regions. There's so much to do, Mr. Speaker, in social policy. We have to recognise that hungry kids don't learn. Homeless, unsettled kids can't succeed. Stressed parents with the best will in the world can't provide, and a forgotten, beaten generation won't pay for the superannuation of tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, we need to remember that our environment is more than a brand to be milked as long as the contaminants don't show up. Our environment is not only what sustains us now, it's what's got to sustain our kids and their kids into the future. Dirty rivers, overfished seas. Mr. Speaker, urban jungles are not what we need. Mr. Speaker, clean green technologies will get us part of the way, but let us have no mistake, there is so much to do. Mr. Speaker, finally, it's time we restored pride in being a Kiwi. So, Mr. Speaker, Labour's new direction will be built on a strong, high-value economy and values of social inclusion, tolerance, diversity that are the hallmark of any great society. Mr. Speaker, Labour under David Shearer is called on again to take up its historic mission of hands-on government, of big change, of a new era and a better way that does politics with our people, not to them, that empowers New Zealand from the bottom up, that doesn't slash them from the top down, that builds a high-value economy, that delivers an inclusive society, that champions a sustainable environment, that celebrates our unique identity. With Labour, Mr. Speaker, New Zealand will have a future worth believing in.
I call the